and the secure, transparent mineral supply chains, and of course China's dominance. We have with us Usman Chohan. Thank you for joining us, Usman. How are you looking at this development, first of all? And of course, minerals have become, the mantra of minerals, I would say. First of all, let's sort of dissect it a bit. How do you look at it?
First of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be with you. The most important word you have used is the mantra. The mantra that they are using in the great powers, US and China, is that they have to have supply chain security for rare earth and critical minerals. That is specifically the mantra. And the reason is that while US and China continue to have a little bit of tension in many, many fields, whether it is trade, whether it's education, shipping, etc., it's critical minerals where the US finds itself at a unique disadvantage so early in what is considered a transition in world history as China becomes a larger economy, as China takes over the mantle as the number one country, quote unquote. The critical minerals supply chain was divested to China over a 3-decade period because of globalization, where it was found that China would do a very good job for the world economy by refining and also by extracting, because it has its own large territory which is rich in these minerals, at scale. The at scale portion is now something that the United States and Europe consider to be a mistake, that we shouldn't have handed all of this to China, and so we have to recuperate it. So what the US is trying to do is do at-scale refinery elsewhere. But it takes time to do that. It would take about a decade if you started now, and the US has started now, to be able to do the refining portion at scale. And so China has used this as leverage in its discussions with the United States, whether it's on tariffs, whether it's on other issues, that look, here is something that you shouldn't forget, that we have this trick up our sleeve, and if you don't come to the bargaining table in an honest manner, as an honest counterpart, you know what we might do with this. So the US is going around the world and trying to find other stakeholders, and Pakistan is one of them, in terms of diversifying the global rare earth and critical mineral supply chain. That is the background.
How much of it, in your opinion, you've explained somewhat in terms of an uncharted territory for countries like Pakistan, in a sense for countries like the US also? So are we looking at new norms? Are we looking at new, forms of action as we go forward with these, these exertions?
Certainly they're different norms, but I wouldn't call them new, because 500 years ago, the world economy looked very much like this in what was called mercantilism. So it was every man for himself, or every empire for itself, and people used to think of the world in very zero-sum terms. The colonial powers would start proxy wars and invasions and all sorts of other such actions back in the day to secure more territory, to enslave the natives, to extract the resources there, and so on. We're very much going back to those old norms. And what the last 80 years did was give us a reprieve from that in what was called the liberal rules-based order, but that had many problems of its own. And Pakistan is one of those countries that has seen the hypocrisy of the new, like 80-year-old system up front, up close and personal. So it wasn't that this new system was particularly good, but I do fear for the old system, because that winner takes all and every man for himself system was a nasty one. And yes, you're right that there are going to be changes. Those changes have been acknowledged now publicly. They have been a decade in the making. But for example, right now, the Canadian Prime Minister, in his speech at APEC, said that we're not going to go back to the old ways, and that system is dead. The old system is dead. Other leaders are echoing this. The only country that is truly advocating for the old system is actually China. China has said that no, there is room for cooperation, there is room for global integration and so on. But in terms of the countries that have been losing ground, they have certainly made statements recognizing that the old system is gone.
Usman, what about the real potential of it? How do you see it? The rare earth minerals, the potential for, of course, this kind of diplomacy that is at play at this time in the background, and of it translating into actual gains for a country like Pakistan. How would you rate it?
The gains for Pakistan are contingent on how much of the supply chain we manage to secure for ourselves. So if we are simply extracting things from the ground and selling them to other countries where they would be refined, where they would be inserted into high-end technological uses, then our gains would be quite minimal, but still large. It is estimated that Pakistan's mineral wealth is $6 trillion worth. Some push it up to $8 trillion. It can change depending on the prices of these minerals in the world market. So it's anywhere in that range. Now, we could sure do with that kind of money, but if that would only involve us digging and selling it out. But what if we could add refining processes, also the high-end factories where this stuff is used? I mean to say a fuller extent of the supply chain. Then the numbers become really appetizing. But at that level, then you would face competition from many other countries that are trying to secure this in a mercantilist world. So that is a huge opportunity for Pakistan. Other countries also enjoy very large endowments of minerals, anywhere from Central Asia to Central Africa to Central America. I mean, they're quite well spread. I mean, this is a very bountiful earth. And we are only now discovering the importance of these things in because it's become a political issue. But the sorts of things that we are talking about in terms of rare earth and critical earth, these extend so far down the periodic table that most people have not heard these names in public conversations, and that's what we're competing for. The use cases for this are also things that are of modern demands, our contemporary world, ranging from data centers for AI to the new edge mobile phones to electric hybrid vehicles to new kinds of panels. The usages of the 21st century economy for these quote rare, because they're actually not rare, but certainly critical minerals is enormous. And therefore, how much of the supply chain we can secure will determine how much we can gain for it. And I advocate that we should be thinking of a larger percentage of the value chain rather than just extracting and selling off immediately.
Terms of it, how much of it and what share of it do you think it's going to become a part of global economy and also particularly Pakistan's economy? Like you said, of course, it depends on
Well,
how we go forward. In terms
it does depend on how we go forward because, in terms of the share of the global economy, the value of other elements in the global economy will still remain significant. For example, food security will become a significant question for many countries as climate change induces droughts, induces things. So we shouldn't discount, for example, agriculture. And the terms of trade for agriculture countries might become stronger in the future because of the precarity of the environment. Similarly, there is a significant knowledge economy which involves intellectual property and other things which are intangibles, which will also remain significant. Whether it is patents, whether it is copyright, whether it is new innovations, whether it is methodologies and processes, those do command a significant premium and they will continue to do so, perhaps even more so. And that doesn't depend on physical things. But this critical mineral is called critical for a reason because, insofar as manufacturing matters, and we will want actual devices, we can't just live off of IP and basic commodities. That middle portion, which would be considered a primary sector, but a latter primary sector after agriculture, does matter. Otherwise, we won't be able to enjoy the 21st century's benefits. You won't see the manufacture. You simply remain at the blueprints. That is how important it is. So what I'm saying is that the global economy is a very diverse sphere, but critical minerals, insofar as manufacturing matters, it is very important. And certainly the politics around it will become more acute because to gain that technological edge is very important right now as the pace of innovation is accelerating in certain fields where these things matter.
But do you see, countries losing their hegemony with regard to this? When, of course, like other countries are coming into the foray, they're getting involved, so that monopoly will cease to be there as far as rare earth minerals are concerned.
Yes, that's an interesting point. So, as more and more countries become cognizant of the importance of the criticality of certain elements, rare earths, and so on, they will try to edge in. They will try to manufacture or extract or refine. But again, China will be the one that does it at scale. So, they will always command some presence in the global supply chain. What other countries can do is refine at a more inefficient level, do it with some efficiency losses, or specialize in certain minerals that they have more of an abundance of in endowment, or with applications to certain types of technologies. Finding niches of that sort is very likely, but it is unlikely that even a decade from now it would be cost effective for any major power to try to displace China entirely in the refining of these minerals, because it's not just that China extracts and then refines what it has. It also takes in minerals from around the world, such as from Latin America, from Africa, and so on. And those then get passed on for usage in the supply chain. So nobody is really going to be able to displace China. So it is very important. And I feel like sometimes we forget this in 2025, that we are blessed to have a very unique friendship, and in fact many people would say, both on Chinese side and our side, brotherhood with China. We shouldn't take our special relationship with China for granted ever, because as China proceeds further, it's not just the refining but the application. China is pushing that boundary of application as well. That means that if it ever imposes a regime that is preferential with other countries, it will consider Pakistan a priority. So you do already enjoy the window. So even as you become more and more multilateral and you think about multipolarity, let's not forget the special consideration that China has for us and we have for them. This will become more
Usman,
important as we hit the mid 21st century.
Usman, as far as, I want to come to a general sort of outlook on minerals as in terms of economy. Do you see this having a multiplier effect, as far as investment is concerned? Because when a country like the US opens the door and edges in, there has to be a multiplier effect. Don't you agree?
I certainly agree. Pakistan's biggest limitation in the last 80 years has been the absence of investment capital. So we always knew that the potential was there, whether it is the natural endowments that Pakistan enjoys, that is a blessing from the Lord, or it is our human talent, our human capital, and that simply needed more investment. You do see extraordinary people in Pakistan doing amazing stuff, and at the same time, you see inequality in that, just like you see inequality in the economy. So the missing ingredient was large scale investment capital. Mining is an area where, because there is global interest in trying to secure edges within the supply chain, there is readiness for investment, irrespective of what sorts of legal, political, and economic conditions are on the ground. There's far more openness to invest. Pakistan is also very open to the idea that international players come and set up those sorts of processes for extraction, for shipping, hopefully for refinement. So from all sides, we see an openness towards things. Now, the question is, where do the benefits of that go? We should always look for the dividends of this to always go towards local communities. We should look for investment for the public value, for the people, because this capital doesn't reproduce itself easily. So you use up your natural endowment in minerals, it ain't coming back. You just have to keep digging deeper, and it becomes more expensive, and then you're likely to run out at some point. So what you need is a more sustainable approach to your economy. This is the same with oil, and you see how the Gulf countries are diversifying away from oil. They're imagining what their country will be like 50 years from now. So we should also look at this as part of a portfolio of assets that Pakistan has. So we're using our minerals as part of the development of our overall economy, which includes human capital, which includes agriculture, which includes everything. And then it is worth doing. Otherwise, if we don't do it in a sustainable manner, then I believe it's better to just leave it in the ground so that some other generation comes and uses it more wisely.
We also had the Minister for Finance saying that Pakistan is working on major legal and regulatory reforms to support responsible investment and mutual benefit. Do you think, we've been talking about how essential these are to get the momentum of economy going. Once they're in place, would you have an idea of what the pace of development, it could impact?
Yes, because historically, the greatest impediment to the development of our mining sector has been a lack of policy clarity on the provincial and federal level vis-a-vis the resources. So if you can bring policy coherence, you make it a lot easier for the investors to come in and to do their work more efficiently in a stable and secure manner. It doesn't mean that if you didn't do these reforms, that investment wouldn't come. It's just that important. And as I said, there's an openness to get things running in Pakistan no matter what. But you can certainly make it easier for everybody if you have policy coherence, and you'd be making up for the deficits that you had in the past by not doing this. Overall, policy coherence is very, very important for any country because investors do need that sense of a future cash flow, a sense of a future path to cash flows. That always becomes easier when there's policy coherence that these are the people I have to deal with, this is what I need to get done, these will be my returns, and these will be my expenses. So the statement that was made by the minister basically signals that we are more cognizant of that and we're going to make it easier for investors because this is just that important to us and to the world. So that's what we're trying to signal.
When, I know that you have little time, but Usman, in terms of positioning ourselves as a balancing act, you spoke about China and of course the importance that Pakistan has, the relationship that we have with China. But as balancing goes, in your opinion, with the background of investment, we are also looking at, developing ties that we have old ties with. We have relationships with the US, we have the relationships with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, also, of course, China. So in terms of balancing, one has to agree that Pakistan at this time is doing a stellar job.
Yes, and I believe that you have covered this very well on your show over the last few months in recognizing the excellence of diplomacy in Pakistan, which is historic, although the challenges were greater in the past, but Pakistan has always sought that balancing act, and the conditions that have been changed on the ground reality where Pakistan has demonstrated its will to fight and protect itself, but also that it is a well-intentioned actor that's not looking for a fight, but will stand up for it. This signals something to the rest of the world that, okay, we shouldn't look at them or pigeonhole them into this or that box. These are real people with a real program for their destiny. And that is what is being reflected. Pakistan is sincere in its friendship with China, with the Middle East, with Turkey, with America, all the actors. It has actually hit a sweet spot that would be the envy of every other country because other countries continue to be pigeonholed into this or that camp, even though everybody would benefit from a more balanced global multipolar system. We've actually pulled off, but that required some demonstration of will and some demonstration of force to protect ourselves. So that success is now being manifested, and I think the legacy of this will continue, whether or not we face more conflicts.
Right. Thank you so much, Usman. Thank you for your very valuable input. On that note, of course, Pakistan has a transformational opportunity in minerals. And at this time, we see a government strongly exploring it. And we also see it backed by legal and regulatory reforms in the making, with a transforming economy in front of us. Let's hope that we get there. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.